Hi there, smart monks, and welcome to my channel. This is my little platform where I turn struggling math students into maths masters. I post videos weekly, so subscribe to the channel. It will really help if you want to be a member of the Maths Monkey community. So, grade 9, this is my first video for you guys.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for.
Yeah, and I'm going to be teaching you all about equations. I'm going to be teaching you how to simplify them. I'm going to be teaching you how to apply your algebraic rules to actually get to the solutions. And hopefully by the end of this video, I can get you to really feel confident and really get you to feel like you can really do equations without having any hiccups. Also, in the description below, you will find that I have attached worksheets that you can download and actually practice your equations. Please keep an eye out on my community page on my YouTube channel. If it's not in the description just yet, I am working on that platform. And yeah, I will then hopefully get you to understand this work and get you to feel confident in solving equations. So, enough talk. Let's jump into the video. Okay, grade 9s, welcome to this lesson, and we are going to be looking at algebra, specifically at equations. Now, by now you will know that algebra has got a lot of types of questions that can be asked. They can ask you to simplify, they can ask you to factorize, they can ask you to substitute. But it's important for you to be able to identify what are they asking you so that you know what method you must use. So when we're doing equations, your questions will always be solve for x or find the solution to y, or what value for x will make this expression true. Wherever they're asking you to find a numerical value for a letter, that is an equation, okay? So that's how you will identify it. So everything that you learn in this video, you will then apply to a question like that. Okay, so what are the general rules for equations? Okay, so when you're working with equations, firstly, you always want to move the variables to one side and then the constants to the other side. So everything that has the letters on the one side of the equal to sign and everything else on the other. The point is to get the variable on its own. Okay? Then you also want to get if you want to get x on its own, that means you have to remove everything else. And to remove everything else would mean that you would have to do its opposite. So if there's a x plus 5, you will do its opposite, which is minus 5. Okay? The opposites that you should know about is if you see an addition, the opposite would be subtraction. If you see a multiplication, the opposite would be division. If you see a square, the opposite would be square roots, and obviously vice versa for these, and then cube and cube roots. Okay, so also what you do on the one side of the equal to sign, you must do on the other side of the equal to sign. You must get rid of the brackets and the roots first, and then lastly, to get rid of the fraction, you will multiply each term by the LCM. So this is the general rule that will be governing all your calculations. So I would suggest that you write it down on a page, and when you're actually attempting questions, then you can work through this and use this as sort of your guideline or your checklist. Okay, so let's actually apply these rules. So let's do simple examples, right? So if we look at this equation now, ideally we want to get x alone, remember, and we want to move everything else away. But let's first just simplify whatever we see here. So if I look on the left hand side, you'll see that I've got a minus 2 and plus 24. So that I can already simplify because minus 2 plus 24 is equal to plus 22. Okay, plus 22, positive 22. So I've literally from that step to that step, I just simplified. But now the rule says we want to get x by itself. Okay, so whatever is with x, we want to get rid of by doing the opposite. And what is the opposite of x plus 22? The opposite of positive 22 is negative 22. And so what we do on the one side, we have to do on the other side, right? So you'll subtract 22 on the left hand side and you'll subtract 22 on the right hand side, and that will end up giving you x equals to negative 9. So what have you actually calculated? You've calculated that in this equation, if I put a 9 here and I subtract 2 and I add 24, I will get 13. Okay. And you always only stop with your equations once you actually have x is equal to something. Okay, so let's try another example. Again, the rule says we want to solve for x, we want to solve for the variable. So whatever we get in, we want to move all the x's to the one side and all the constants to the other side. So if I look at this equation, do you see that I want to move this x, this 6x, on the left-hand side because I want all my variables together. And this 9, I want to move over to that side because I want all my constants together. So how do I do this? So if I want to get rid of the negative 9 and I want to add and bring this over, I will first subtract both sides by negative 6 so that I get the negative 6 away here and so that it can be on this side. And then I would also get rid of the negative 9 by subtracting both sides by negative 9. Okay, so what am I left with? If I say 4x minus 6x, right, it will give me 4x minus 6x here. But now remember, I took away this 9 here. So this positive 9 minus 9 will give me 0. And then on this side now, this 6x minus that 6x, I got rid of the x on the side. So now I'm just left with this negative 3 minus 9. Okay, so let me explain again what is happening here. I'm moving my variables to the one side and I'm moving my constants to the other. But the way I move something is by doing its opposite. So if I look at here, this is positive 9. So I'm going to do the opposite to both sides. So I'm going to subtract 9 here and I'm subtract 9 there. Then on this side, I have 6x. So I want to get rid of the 6x on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 6x on both sides. And then I just simplify. So 4x minus 6x will give me this expression. But this 9 is now gone because I've subtracted the 9 here. This 6x is also gone because I've subtracted the 6x, so I'm just left with negative 3 and negative 9. Okay, now I've got my constants on the one side and I've got my variables on the one side and I've got my constants on the other side. So I would literally just simplify. 4 minus 6 is negative 2x equals to negative 12. And now what I want you to see is here we've got negative 2 times x. And remember, the goal is to get x by itself. So if I've got negative 2 times x, I then will have to do the opposite to get rid of it. So what is the opposite of multiplication? It's division. So therefore, I'll then divide both sides now by the negative 2, and that will then give me x equals negative 12 divided by negative 2 equals 6. And I know I'm done with this equation because I've got x is equal to a specific number. Okay. So again, the rule is we want to get x by itself and we want to remove everything else that is an x. And the way we remove anything across equations is by doing its opposite. And then we will move down and continually do the opposite so that we can end up getting x by itself. Okay, so let's do some examples with brackets. So we've got a question 3 here, says 2 times negative x plus 3 in brackets equals to 8. Now, when you have a bracket, just like in all other calculations, you always get rid of the bracket first. You always multiply the bracket out. So in this case, you're going to multiply the 2 multiply by the negative x, which will give me negative 2x. And then the 2 multiplied by the 3, which will give me the 6, equals 8. So step number 1 was to get rid of the brackets, right? By saying 2 times negative x and 2 multiplied by 3. And that's how we got that answer, right? Now we want to get x by itself, right? So we need to get rid of the 6. And by getting rid of the 6, we subtract 6 on both sides, right? So on the left-hand side, the 6 is then gone. But on the right-hand side, we have 8 minus 6, which then gives me the 2. And again, now I have x by itself. So if I want to, I need to get x by itself, sorry. So I'll go negative 2 times x equals 2. So if I want to get rid of it, I then divide both sides by negative 2. And that ends up giving x equals to negative 1. And I know I've completed that because I have x is equal to a value. Okay, let's do another one with a bracket. So if I have a look at this question now, I've got 1 minus x plus 2 in brackets equals 5 plus x. Again, we want to get rid of the bracket, but take note here now, in front of this bracket, I actually have a negative 1, right? So what we need to do is we need to multiply the negative 1 into the bracket by doing the following. So I'll say 1, so this negative times x will give me negative x, And this negative times this positive will give me negative 2. And there the step was to get rid of the x. The bracket. Okay, now that we've gotten rid of the bracket, now we can again move the x's to the one side and all the constants to the other side. Right, so if I have a look here, I want to move this x over, so I'll subtract x on both sides. I want to move this 1, or what we can do is let's simplify. I think it will be easy if we simplify this. So if we say 1 minus 2, it will give us that, and that negative x. So I've literally just simplified this. I took 1 minus 2, which gives me the negative 1, and that negative x is still there. So now that I have this, I can actually say, I want to move this x over, and I want to move this 1 to that side. So on both ends, I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to subtract x because I want to get rid of x there and move it over here. So I subtract x on both sides, but there's also this 1 over here that I don't want to have on the side, so I add 1 on either side. Right, so if I simplify this side, the 1's cancel because it's negative 1 plus 1. So negative x minus negative x will give me negative 2x. And then on this side, I got rid of the x. So now I've got just 5 plus the 1, and that will give me the 6. And now I divide both sides by negative 2, and that will give me x equals negative 3. And I know that I'm done with this question because I have x is equal to a specific value. Alright, so now we're going to look at equations with fractions. Okay, so if you have a look here, I've got a quarter x is equal to 6. Now the rule is when we have a fraction is we want to take whatever we have in the denominator, right? And if there's only 1, you're just going to take that number as is. If it isn't 1, you're going to take the lowest common multiple. But if I look at this now, quarter, I want to just find x, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each term by the denominator. That way I will get rid of the x, rid of the fraction. So if I go multiply each one by 4, you'll notice that this 4 and that 4 cancels each other out, and I'm just left with x on the one side, and then this 6 multiplied by 4 will then give me the 24 on the right hand side. Okay, so this step by multiplying each of these terms by the denominator then removes the actual bracket. So look, from that step to that step, there is no longer a fraction. Sorry, I don't know why I can't say the right terms today. But in order to get rid of the fractions, right, we multiply each term by the denominator. Okay, and that's how we get x equals to 24. Now, if I look at the next question, so have a look here. We've got x over 3 minus a quarter is equal to 3/4. So we want to find out what is x. But now, do you notice here, we can't just multiply it by the denominator because we have two different denominators, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to find out what is the lowest common multiple between 3 and 4. So you write down the multiples of 3 and you write down the multiples of 4, and you see what is the smallest number that both of them have in common. And in this case, it's 12. Okay, so you multiply each of them now by 12, right? So if I take this term and I multiply it by 12, then the 12 and the 3, 12 divided by 3 gives me 4, and then the 4 multiplied by the x gives me 4x, and then I go 12 divided by 4 is 3, and then negative 1 times 3 gives me the negative 3, and then I've got 3 divided by 4 is, 12 divided by 4 gives me 3, and then 3 times 3 gives me the 9. Okay, so all I'm doing here is taking this fraction and multiplying it by each denominator. If you don't know how to do it in your head, you can do it on your calculator. Okay, so you end up with 4x minus 3 is equal to 9. Now what I want to do is I want to get the variables on its own, and I want to get the constants on one side. So I'm going to remove the 3. But now you already know, how do I remove that negative 3? I do the opposite by adding 3 on both sides. Okay, so then if I add 3 on both sides, I end up with 4x equals, and then 9 plus 3 gives me the 12. Okay, and then to get rid of, remember this is now 4 times x. I just want to get x alone, so I do the opposite and I divide both sides by 4, and that ends up giving me x is equal to 3. And that's how you will solve questions with fractions. Okay, so if there's only one fraction, you just take the denominator and multiply all the terms. If you have more than one, then you will take the lowest common multiple and multiply each term by the lowest common multiple and then solve using your normal rules. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video. I'm going to give you an exercise and I want you to do the exercise. Try and see based on what I've showed you now and what I've taught you, if you are able to then apply. And then once you are done and you actually attempted the questions, then you unpause the video and then you mark your work to see if you got it right. Okay, remember, the only way we can actually learn maths, even if you understand when somebody explains, the only way we actually learn is by doing. So I'm giving you the opportunity to do it, and then I will give you the answers after this. So please pause the video now, attempt it, and then unpause it, and then you work through the answers and we can mark your work.
A few minutes later.
Okay, so hopefully you completed that, and let's mark and see how well you did. So what you want to do now is you want to keep a pen out, you want to make ticks there where you got it right, and you want to make the corrections where you got it wrong so that you're actually able to identify where you are making your mistakes. Right, so in the first question, you have to remember you have to move all the variables to the one side. And so if we had to move this 5x, then we would subtract the 5x on both sides. And if we want to remove this 4, we would subtract the 4 on both sides. So essentially we end up with x minus 5x on the left hand side and then 12 minus 4 on the right hand side. So x minus 5x will then give me the negative 4x, and then the 12 minus 4 would then give me the 8. Again, now I've got negative 4 times x, so if I do the opposite, divide both sides by negative 4. And your answer for the first question should have been x is equal to negative 2. Okay, so make a tick there, try and identify where you went wrong. And yeah, let's try the second question. So here we've got x over 3 plus x over 2 equals 5. This is again a fraction question. But note here, we have two numbers in our denominator, so we have to find the lowest common multiple. So we write down the multiples of 3, which is 3, 6, 9, 12, and we write down the multiples of 2, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And the lowest common multiple would then between these two be 6, right? So I would multiply each term by 6. Right, so the way I would then find the answer is I'll say 6 divided by 3 is 2, multiplied by x is 2x. Then 6 divided by 2 is 3, multiplied by x is 3x. And then we've got 5 multiplied by 6 gives me the 30. And now I can just simplify by saying 2x plus 3x gives me 5x equals to 30. And then I divide both sides by 5, and I end up with x is equal to 6. Okay, let's do the last two. So here we've got brackets that we have to get rid of here. Okay, so in this case, we multiply in the brackets on the left, so you have to get 2x plus 8. Remember, 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times 4 is 8. And then here we've also got 3 times x is 3x, and then 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. So what I want to do is I want to get all the variables to the one side, all the constants to the other side. And so in this case, to remove this 8, I'm going to subtract 8 on both sides. And to remove this 3x, I'm going to subtract the 3x on both sides. Okay. So on the left-hand side, I end up with 2x minus 3x. And on the right-hand side, I end up with negative 6 minus the negative 8. If I simplify both sides, I end up with negative x is equal to negative 14. And I divide both sides by negative 1. And then I end up with x is equal to 14. Okay, so well done if you've got all of them correct so far. Also, if you didn't, it's fine. Remember, the idea is to find out where you're making your mistakes so that when you come to a test or an exam situation, and you don't make those same mistakes. Okay, now in this case, again here, I've got 3 different variables now. Okay, and I want you to pay attention here. If I look, I've got 20, I've got 4, I've got 5. So my lowest common multiple for each of this is 20. If I wrote down all the multiples for each of 3 of them, the lowest number that they'll all have in common is 20. So what you have to do here is you have to multiply each term by 20. Okay? So the way you would do this, I will say 20 divided by 20. That gives me 1. And then I'll say 1 times whatever is on top. And that's exactly what I did for all 3. So I say 20 divided by 4 is 5. So I've got the negative from that negative there, and the 5 is the answer of 20 divided by 4. And then this 3x minus 2 is a 3x in the numerator. Okay, again, is equal to, again, I go 20 divided by 5, which is 4, and then I multiply that by the numerator. And now this is just went from a fraction question to a bracket question. So now we have to get rid of the brackets by multiplying the negative 5 by the 3x and the negative 2, and then multiplying this 4 by the 4x and the negative 1. So this is it simplified. So minus 5 times 3x is negative 15x, and minus 5 times minus 2 is positive 10. Same as we have here, 4 times 4 is 16x, and then 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Okay, so let's simplify what we have on the left-hand side. X minus 15x is minus 14x, and then 1 plus 10 is 11. And then on the right-hand side is already stays the same. So what I need to do now, remember we want to get x by itself. See, we're doing the same thing over and over. So we want to get x by itself and all the constants on the other side. So the way we would do this is on this end, I'm going to subtract 11 on both sides, and I'm going to subtract 16x on both sides. Okay? And that will essentially give me negative 14 minus 16x. And on the left-hand side, I've got negative 4 minus the 11. I simplify this because they like terms. This will give you negative 30x. And then if I simplify this, I get negative 15. So then divide both sides by negative 30. And I end up with negative 15 over negative 30 is positive a half. And that is how you would deal with equations with fractions. Now, guys, the last one is really an extreme case. So if you didn't get it right, it's fine. But I would suggest that you write it down and first write down the question. And after you've seen this now, switch off the your laptop or your phone or wherever you're looking, and try and attempt it again based on the steps that you've seen now. And do it over and over until you actually can get it right. Okay, alright, so thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully you understand equations a lot better. Alright, very nice, that's the end of our first video. Hopefully you found it helpful and that you feel good about equations and that you feel confident that you will be able to answer no matter how they ask it to you in a question paper. And yeah, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please add any comments or questions in the description below. Remember to check out my worksheets that you can also find in the description. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!